in under subjection. So now that we're under everybody, under the Moabites, the Ammonites, the Hamites, because any of these nations could come into this land, and you in this country with an education, high school, college, you ain't got no business. A damn Hamite can speak maybe 5 words in English, and all of a sudden he builds up a shop, and all of a sudden a year later he's expanding. Same thing with the Moabites. Same thing with the Ammonites, Chinese and the Japanese. Same thing with the Arabs. Same thing with the East Indians. Same thing with the Koreans. All right? And they I don't know if Esau, pulled them to the side and told them that these are the Israelites, but I know the elites, whether they told them or not, the elites know what's going on. See, the elites, the Rothschilds, the top elites of this society, the super rich, the trillionaires of this society, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, and so forth, the Wahlbergs, the Schiffs, they know exactly who you are. They have all the records. They know that you are the Israelites, and they know that you're going to put them into slavery. But they're figuring that they can trick the Most High. Find a way to make the Most High forget that you the children of Israel, so that they can stay in power forever. They're not going to stay in power forever, and they know it. See, this situation out there in Missouri, out there in Ferguson, you had people protesting, cops kind of losing it and everything. But you know what? Let it happen. Let it happen. Let the next thing happen. Because they showed you, man, they didn't just have local cops. They had police and riot gear, and they had those MRAPs. They had those. It looked like a war zone somewhere in a third world country, in Iraq. Actually, those MRAPs were built to fight in Iraq and the Middle Eastern countries that they have those skirmishes over. And then they eventually called in the National Guard. So what do you call that? You call that martial law. And there was a point where the police, they were shooting tear gas canisters even at the press, because they don't want the press to cover them, because they have a right to cover what's going on, because it's out in the public. But they'll shoot canisters at them and say, "Oh, we didn't realize it." The first real incident of martial law was up there in Boston, about a year and a half ago? Yeah. They were looking for so-called 2 guys, and they sent in the police, but they were dressed like they were ready for a war. And then they had basically they didn't have their 9s, their service 9s or their Glock 9s out. They had rifles, man. Whether they had M16s, whether they still use them or not, or whether they had Uzis, or whether they had AK-47s. They had helmets on. They had the goggles on. They had the military-looking fatigues on, and they moved in that type of military formation. And they made everybody suspect, man. That's why they were going from door to door, and you had to open up your door. If you didn't open the door fast enough and let them go up in there, they were going to arrest you, man. And they were going in there yelling at you, yelling at your wife, kicking furniture over, shooting dogs. They went in there as a military force. And that's martial law. That's what you call a police state.
This thing stinks to high heaven. These two.
And that was the first step. Horrible. Now you have this situation. You're gonna have another situation. But there is. Now maybe the next situation, they'll have agent provocateurs with guns to shoot certain guns. Maybe shoot a cop or something like that, or a couple of cops, and cause them cops to just lose it. And those police officers are not disciplined, man. Most of them are not disciplined. Because you might have one inferior officer or police officer, he might see a gunshot a bullet fly over his head, and he might just lose it. And when his commanding officer says stop, he going to keep going. And other guys that are not disciplined, they're going to keep going. And it's going to cause a mass death. And then it's going to lead to these concentration camps, like the scriptures speak of in the book of Revelation. So we're coming to that time. And we've been saying this for the longest, man, that martial law is coming to this country. There you go.
Well, guess what? Well, guess what? It's already here. You know? Now it says, this is from the ACLU, American Civil Liberties.
Let me just read this real quick. All right, this is an article. Let me see. Okay, it says, trying to go to the top page here, or the top of the page. Okay, the article is entitled, it's Global Research. The article is entitled De facto martial law in Ferguson, Missouri. It says the state of Missouri, with the full backing of the Obama administration, keep that in mind, because Obama could have called all that back. See, the calling in of the National Guard, that's a executive order from the president. All right, has responded to continuing protests against the police murder of Michael Brown, an unarmed African-American teenager, by imposing de facto martial law on the largely working-class city of Ferguson. And then the article goes on, all right? It speaks about, it says residents have been stripped of their constitutionally guaranteed right to assemble, because that's protest, the right to protest, all right? Peaceably assemble, all right? Reporters have been arrested or banished in violation of freedom of the press. Police checkpoints, sounds like Iraq, have been set up at major intersections. A massive force of military vehicles, and don't take my word for this article, watch the news. Helicopters, sound cannons, flash grenades, tear gas, SWAT, special weapons and tactics, or special weapons assault teams wielding assault weapons, and local cops backed by National Guard troops has been deployed to intimidate, terrorize, and crush social protests. So it's happened. It's already here. We've been saying it was going to happen, and it's happening as we speak.
Yeah, America is basically a war zone right now. You know, now this is from an article on the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. The title of the report is War Comes Home, the excessive militarization of American policing. All across the country, heavily armed SWAT teams are raiding people's homes in the middle of the night, often just to search for drugs. It should enrage us that people have needlessly died during these raids, that pets have been shot, and that homes have been ravaged. Our neighborhoods are not war zones, and police officers should not be treating us like wartime enemies. But that's exactly what the American public has become ever since the Trading with the Enemy Act. I believe that was signed into law by FDR. A March of 1933, you know. So basically, you know, the average American citizen out there is basically an enemy of the state. That's why they had that movie, Enemy of the State, you know, with Will Smith. And what were they doing? They were tracking the guy. They were looking for him. Why? Because he was a law-abiding citizen, and then all of a sudden they deemed him an enemy. And what were they doing through the whole movie? Chasing him, trying to find him. You know, and that's the reason why they want to implant everybody with these microchips. One of the reasons, you know, so they can track you. You know, your every move. You know, your transactions, your medical records, and all that. It says, and yet every year billions of dollars worth of military equipment flows from the federal government to state and local police departments. Departments use these wartime weapons in everyday policing, especially to fight the wasteful and failed drug war, which has unfairly targeted people of color. As you're gonna find out, man, that you got these assholes like Nate talking about, he don't believe in conspiracies, which he's a double-minded fool. Because in one minute in one breath he'll say he doesn't believe in conspiracies, in another breath he'll speak about conspiracies. Dude is a double-minded clown, man. You know, there's a conspiracy against so-called people of color, so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native American Indians. You know, because here it is, you've been here in this country, 400 and